Hello, my name is MG Govia. I'm the Education and Outreach Liaison here at OKA11. Today's presentation is going to discuss upcoming law changes that are going to affect excavators. You may have heard a few that are going to take place. It's all effective on November 1st. So let's dive in and talk about those now. First of all, there's quite a few things that are coming into play. The House Bill 2028 will be effective no later than November 1st, 2021. A couple things that we're going to discuss today is going to be about the life of the ticket. It will be 14 calendar days. Mandatory positive response for the member companies, excavators, as well as what OKA11's role is. Provisions for the state of emergency declaration. Required damage reporting to OKA11 in addition to the operator. And then better defined excavator responsibilities around hazardous pipelines. And then we are also going to talk about the excavator that may be liable to the operator for misuse of emergency tickets or putting in excessive and unreasonable updates on a ticket. Couple things to keep in mind. Those are all law changes that are going to go into effect, but OKA11 is also going to take this time to make some procedure changes at the same time. One is going to be the reduction of the worksite buffer, and I'll explain that here in just a moment. And then the default start time of a ticket will be 12 a.m. on the work to begin date. Currently, before November 1, this is how assets are registered and how a ticket is processed. So in this illustration, a pipeline company registers their asset with us using centerline data, and we put a 500-foot buffer on either side of that center line. Then we get GPS or center point data for a well, and in the same way, we put a 500-foot buffer around that well. Some companies will register their assets with us just by quarter sections. They'll just let us know that, hey, digging is going to take place in any of these 6 quarter sections. Let us know. So these are how the registered service areas are put into our system. And then when a caller calls or puts in a web ticket, we draw what's called a dig site polygon. We take that information that's provided to us and we draw where we think the work is going to take place to the best of our understanding with the excavator. Currently, in addition to that, we put a 300-foot buffer around that dig site polygon. This is to compensate for any miscommunication or misunderstanding between the excavator and our CSRs. When this best practice was developed, it was when more than 70% of all of our locates were done over the telephone, and we were literally playing the telephone game with our excavators. So what we've done now is realize that over 70% of our locate requests are being put in through our website. Mapping information is a lot more concise, and so we understand that that buffer could be reduced to help our member companies from being over notified. So we're reducing that buffer to 150 feet. So in the first picture, you would notice that all 3 companies would have received a locate request, the pipeline, the well, and the company that was registered with quarter sections. But going forward, with the reduction of that buffer, the well company would not have received the ticket going forward. So there may be a reduction in the number of tickets going out to member companies because we are not going to try to overcompensate for miscommunication on telephone. So keep that in mind when you're putting in your locate request, that you are going to give us as exact information as possible so that we can make sure that we're giving the correct member company's notification that digging is going to take place near their assets. All right, let's talk about the laws that are going to take effect on November 1st. First, we're going to clearly define the life of a ticket. The ticket life is going to be 14 calendar days. So what does that look like? Well, let's say that on November 1st, Monday, a request is put in. Just like today, a request should be no less than 48 hours, not including the date of notification, and not more than 10 business days away from when excavation is going to begin. So on Monday, November 1st, a request is put in, and we're going to use the default 48 hours, not including the date of notification. And so that means date of notification wouldn't count, 48 hours, so day 1, day 2, and then work to begin date will be on Thursday. And I want to remind you that the ticket start time on the work to begin date by default will be midnight. So as of midnight, November 4th, you'd be able to begin work. Obviously, you probably get there a little later than midnight, but It gives that full 48 hours, not including day notification, and then it gives you the full day of when your work to begin date is. So day 1 of your ticket would be on Thursday, November 4th. So your ticket life is 14 calendar days, and I want to point out that that means that weekends and holidays and all those are just calendar days. So day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So from the 4th through the 17th would be the life of that ticket, from the work to begin date to the expiration date. And if your work is going to continue beyond the 17th, then what you would need to do then is realize that your update needs to take effect on the 18th, 48 hours, and then not including the date of notification. So you would want to update it 3 business days prior to midnight of the day after expiration. So that update would be put in on the 15th. 15th doesn't count. 16th, 17th, and then at midnight on the 18th would be the beginning of your extended ticket. Made sense? Good. The next topic that we're going to discuss is mandatory positive response. Mandatory positive response is clear communication of the status of processing a locate request so that the excavator can confirm response prior to doing any digging. We're going to look at what this looks like for our members, the excavators who are making the request, and then what OQA 11's role in keeping that information. First of all, for the members are going to provide the status of processing the locate request back to OQA 11 through our portal, and that status is then going to show up on the locate request for the member for the excavator to look at. So the member is going to respond. That information is going to be available for the excavator to look at. Every member will have to use OQA 11 as a communication portal to let the excavators know the status of that locate request. Then our excavators, the ones who are putting in that locate request, the ones who are going to be digging, are required to check for response from all companies on the locate request prior to that work to begin date and time. They're going to be able to jump on, they're going to see the statuses of each member company and be able to understand whether or not they are ready to begin, or if they need to put in a second notice for anybody who has not responded prior to the work to begin date and time. So positive responses, they're going to be on the bottom of your ticket. They're going to list the codes for the member companies that are on that ticket, and then you'll see their response status. Currently, because it's before the ticket, there's going to be some that will say that the company is not providing positive response right now. But keep in mind, the law comes into effect November 1st, and you're going to be able to see things such as the site has been marked and the facility is located and marked on site, or clear that the facility is not in conflict with the dig site described. Things of that nature. So you will be able to log in as an excavator, pull up the ticket, and be able to see their response and when that happened. And then OQA 11, our role is to keep that communication hub for all the company and excavator to keep record of that communication. So we're going to keep that information to show the request that was put in, the response that was put in by all the excavators, by all the member companies, and then so that you would be able to know whether or not you need to put in a second notice or put any information like that. Also, OQA 11 is going to help with the notification process in that once all the member companies that are listed on that ticket have responded to the locate request, we're going to send an email to the excavator letting them know that. If for some reason 5 hours prior to the work to begin date and time, a member company hasn't responded, we're still going to send out an email 5 hours prior to let the excavator know that they may need to reach out to put in a second notice for somebody who didn't respond prior to the work to begin date. So we're going to help with that communication. Also, we'll provide notification of when tickets need to be updated, things of that nature. So we're trying to help the excavator have that communication throughout the process. Next thing we're going to discuss is the provisions for state of emergency declaration. What this means is when the state government declares a state of emergency, then the time limitations do not apply. So locate requests will still be the start of the communication, and the member companies will provide timelines to the excavator via the positive response. They're going to say, due to the state of emergency, we may not be there by your work to begin date and time, but the day after or the day after that. So there's still going to be communication, but the time limitations will not apply. It will not give, because of the state of emergency, it will not give the excavators permission or no liability when digging before member companies can respond because of that state of emergency. Also, another law that's going to take place is the required damage reporting to OKEA 1. Currently, damage report is a notification that you can call in at any time when damages have been found or discovered. But going forward, after November 1st, that damage reporting is going to be required to OKEA 1. So, especially if you're the company that is on site when damage is discovered, then you will need to contact us so that we can take down that information and provide that information back out to the member companies, especially the facility owner that was affected by that damage. Another topic is the better defined excavator responsibilities around hazardous pipelines. And those two things are going to be preservation of the markings around those underground facilities, and then and what that looks like. I want to remind everybody that contacting OKEA 1 prior to excavation has always been the law. You have to let us know prior to any explosive or that you're going to be digging near any underground facilities or private easement. You have to notify us, and that way you can get those lines marked. If an excavator doesn't do that, you can see on the bottom line that an excavator shall be responsible for damage to any underground facilities of an operator if the notification center was not notified. So this is already established in the law. What is taking place with the new wording or new addition is just better defined around pipelines of hazardous liquid. And so excavation or demolition cannot begin without markings around that hydrocarbon or hazardous liquid pipeline. I take a moment and look over this, but what it's saying is that if that excavator knows that there's unmarked pipelines in that area of proposed excavation, they are not to dig unless those facilities have been marked. So be sure that, especially around around pipelines, that a call needs to be made to us. Get those lines marked so that you can dig safely around those hazardous liquid pipelines. And when that comes to that, it's also required by law to maintain those markings for the duration of the excavation. So if any time the marks are no longer visible, you have to update your request. Even if it's within the 14 calendar days, if on day 10 you're unable to see the markings, you need to stop work, you need to put in that notice to us so that we can get the markings back out there. So do your best to keep them preserved. Additional flags, not running over the markings, things like that will help you so that you can get your full 14 calendar days out of each ticket. And then finally, there's one more thing to talk about, and that's fraudulent requests. Starting in November, excavators may be liable to an operator for the cost of locates. And this is in two conditions. One, if excessive and unreasonable locates are submitted when no excavation is taking place. Or two, if an emergency request isn't justified as an endangerment to life, health, or property. So let's talk about the no work taking place request. If you put in a locate request and in the first 14 calendar days there's a crazy storm that comes in and you're not able to start your project because of flooding or things of that nature, do not worry. That's reasonable. It's understandable why you weren't able to work when you put in a locate request. However, if you put in a locate request and the project timeline is 1 day, 5 days, something of that nature, and then you weren't able to knock it out in the first 14 days, and then 1, 2, 3 locates later, and that means we're in month 3 for a 5-day project, if that would be excessive and unreasonable for that repeat locating when work is not taking place. Okay, so just keep in mind of that. If you're an excavation company that has admin or office personnel who put in an update locate request, you will want to make sure that the communication goes back out to them when a project is complete, so that fraudulent tickets don't go out when work isn't taking place anymore. And then next, let's talk about non-emergency emergency requests. A non-emergency emergency request is exactly what it sounds like. It's when a ticket comes in and they justify it with an endangerment to life, health, or property, but then upon showing up to the location, the crew isn't there ready to begin work. It's a new construction. There is no endangerment to life, health, or property, anything along those lines. Then the member companies or the owners of those facilities could invoice the excavator for a reasonable cost because it was not an emergency locate request. A couple of things to keep in mind with this: we're always looking at justification of the endangerment to life, health, or property. If there is an endangerment to life, health, or property, please do call in an emergency locate request. It's understandable, it's justifiable. However, if you are calling in and you tell us it's an emergency and you need locates done within 2 hours, but in reality your crew, maybe some parts, maybe you won't be able to begin digging for 6, 8, maybe the next morning. If that's the case, you are still justified in putting an emergency locate request for more than 2 hours, because it's still less than 48 hours notice because there's an endangerment to life, health, or property. It's okay if it's still an emergency and you're not working until 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. So keep that in mind as well. You want to be able to give the member companies in that area as much time as possible to help you by marking their facilities and making sure you dig safely around them. We understand you need to dig quickly because of that endangerment to life, health, or property. So with that, I hope this really breaks down the law changes that are going to take place. And if you have any questions, let me know. You can always email me the word education@okie811.org. And if you haven't followed us on all of our social media or our websites, check those out as well. We have a podcast called Digging Deep, and you can find that on all podcast players. We have our website, okie811.org, where you can find our blog and other information. And then, of course, our YouTube channel. Just search for Okie811 on YouTube, and you'll be able to see our webinars, plenty of educational content, our podcast, and more. So thank you for checking this information out. If you do have any questions or need clarification, do not hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you so much, and have a great day. Stay safe.